So we're here again at Smithville on the other side of the building this time, and I just wanted to paint what was directly in front of me, which is some really interesting shapes here. Some simple uh, rectangles, but also these really interesting trees that all seem to have a same curve that are pointing towards that square-shaped building. So we're going to get right into this one. Same setup almost as last time with the yellow, purpley red, and instead of turquoise this time, I'm using Prussian blue. And the ground this time, instead of being more red, is shifted more towards orange. Now, you might be wondering why I'm using, instead of the turquoise this time, I'm using the Prussian blue. Well, it was more of an overcast day, and I hadn't really seen much as far as the sun's light, coming down on the buildings. Um, so I was going a little bit darker with this picture. The other issue with the last painting, not that I see it as an issue, but I wanted to go in a different direction this time and be able to do darker darks than I was able to with the last one. But I didn't, like in the last video, didn't want to do any colors that use black. So alternatively, I'm using the red and blue to make this really dark purple. So it's still very saturated as far as colors go, or as far as darks go, but it's not killing the shadows or anything. So with this one here, you can barely see it, but I had my sketchbook where I did my thumbnails, like I've shown you in other videos, and the thing that I really wanted to make sure I got this time around was the directions of those trees all pointing towards that simple building. So I've laid in the framework here and just start going right for the sky. And I remember really loving how there's this vibration that happens because you have complementary colors of blue and orange. However, just allowing some of that stuff to peek through when you see it on the actual canvas itself, there's just something so tantalizing about it because the values of the blue and the orange are so similar, so it creates this simultaneous contrast. And it's just a really interesting vibration. So going from back to front, I'm taking that little credit card that I like to use. I'm not sure if I've spoken on that in these videos, but that's just a nice little textural trick I like to use either on buildings, trees. It really doesn't matter where you use it. It's just something that I think can break up the paint in a very enticing way that a brush sometimes just can't do. And it's just a different tool to use. When I say it doesn't really matter what you use it on, the only thing that I mean by that is if you do tend to use it for the same thing over and over again. For example, if I only used that credit card effect on buildings, then it kind of takes away some of the charm, and it also just becomes a really predictable gag. Now what I'm trying to do here is sort of get some of those colors that are in the trees into the ground here too. But if you notice, there's the ground that's right in front of me has some greens, but it also has these darker gray sort of tones. So I was just trying to get a little bit of that in there because if you do that, if you use Prussian blue is a very, very intense color. It actually took a lot of white to knock that color down for the sky. Um, but there's if you mix that Prussian blue with the yellow, you get this really intense green. So I was trying to make sure that I didn't use too much of that. And in fact, actually, now that I remember, the yellow that I used was more like a lead yellow. So it's not that bright cadmium like I used in the last video. It was a lot more toned down. So you do get greens, but they're these bluer greens, and because of that orange background, it's very difficult to make it not look like the sky color. So in order to do that, to do something about that, I tried to use the neutral colors that were similar to that tree in the background. I put that on the ground first to knock back any of the orange, and then that way, once I start putting some of these brighter blue greens or greens on top, they start to shift a little bit more towards the green side if they have a blue underneath, if that makes sense. Yeah, it's all about just relationships of color. Now, at this point, I'm trying to paint the this white building that was over there. And again, this is more or less, this is closer to the way that it looked. But you'll see in a little bit what's going to end up happening here when the light changes. And I actually, in a way, didn't follow my own advice from the last video. I said about setting things up so that you can just sort of shift if you need to, and I didn't do that. I know I did, but I didn't. There's certain elements here that it was a little bit more difficult to change if I needed to, but you'll see. Yep, right here. So, also you might notice I keep on adjusting my painting. It was extremely windy that day, so it kept blowing over my canvas. So, that line right there, what happened was the sunlight did come out ultimately, and it pretty much stayed the most of the time, and it was just so enticing that I had to put it in there. I could have kept going under the assumption, or under just using my imagination, that it was an overcast day and it was just very grayed out, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I just felt it was so much more interesting to capture what was right in front of me right there. So then it was a matter of scrambling to try to paint more of what I see. Now the ground is going to be a little bit more green and with some yellow greens, not blue greens. That building now is the white building is now more in shadow. So and also there's things like the trees in the background now are illuminated in a way that they weren't before. So now I took pictures like I normally do, but I'm trying to do as much from life as I can. Yeah, now the sun, there's like a little bit of a barrier, or the base of a fence that was right there, and now that was all being illuminated by sunlight, or by bounce light. Yeah, now there was a little tool there. It might have been too quick for you to notice. I've been pulling it out a couple times in this video, but it's just a little razor. A lot of times you can use them for, I use them for the same way that I would with the credit cards. It's just another tool to get some interesting textures. I like to use them for things like bricks and stuff like that. I'm not going to paint every single individual brick, or paint a tone and then do all the little lines in between. That's just not my mentality. I've done that in the past, and for some that's very rewarding. For me, I like having the impressions of bricks rather than paint 200, 300 of them. Yeah, so now that building is looking really interesting, to me at least, because there's this sort of reddish shadow that's being cast on it, but there's also this sort of green door now is, so there's a little bit more contrast there. It's also a simple geometric shape when there's a lot of these organic shapes around it. I know it was really quick, but those trees, I was really trying to get the branches all to point towards that building too. Yeah, and again, like the darkest, pretty much the darkest darks are around that building. You have this dark, maybe it was a pine in the background, but then you also have the lightness of the sky. You also have the windows are really dark, simple shapes too. And you also have the line of the ground that's sloping down on an incline towards that building too. And then that shadow to the right of the building that's, that's also kind of help create this little, this like triangle of light almost that's hitting the building. Yeah, now I'm just focusing on this building a lot more right now just because that's the lighting effect that I really love. I don't know how much the sunlight is actually going to last, and even though I have photos and whatnot, this is probably around maybe 3:30, possibly maybe 4 in the afternoon. So I know that the sun is going to be coming down soon, and that lighting, I guarantee you that lighting is not the same anymore. And actually, you can see right here, once the clouds started to shift, that it completely changed so many different things. So once I nailed that that's the direction I want to go in, I'm not searching anymore. That's the way I want the lighting to be and whatnot. That's where this is what I'm doing. So that's just a matter of looking at what makes sense on the painting a little bit more so than what makes sense in reality, because I know that that's a fleeting moment, and the way that the lighting was an hour ago versus the way it looks right now on the actual scene, that those two things aren't what's being compared. It's only the painting in this very moment is being compared to what is right in front of me, and the painting that I have in this very moment is an accumulation of all the moments from start to now. And that's when I started to knock back because I realized the whites were just so white, and they were just too distracting, really. There was clouds that were coming out. The clouds are going to be a lot whiter than that. Especially because that barrier, first off, it's not white at all, but also it's in shadow, so there's no way that it would be that bright. Just trying to give a little bit more visual interest to that tree branch right there, because again, like the last painting, the lighting started to hit some of those branches, and that was really neat. But also I felt like that branch was just a little bit too dark against the light sky, so then it was distracting. It's always looking at what parts of the painting are doing, and are they going to where you want it to go.